Welcome to the Climax Academy Live. I'm Jim Miller, the Senior Product and Applications Expert. Today we're going to be focusing on a Q&A session. The topic we've received several questions on is the combination of automated welder and line boring. So I've got a BB5 as an example here, and I've got a BW3, and we'll be going through some of the frequently asked questions that we get. Now during this presentation, we would like to encourage you to go to the bottom of your screen, plug in that Zoom Q&A button, and type any questions that you might have. Now if we run out of time today with question and answers, please submit them anyway, and we'll address those at a later time, or we'll address them directly to you. So with that being said, I always want to start off with safety first. Today we're not really running the machine. We still want to be aware of our surroundings, make sure there's no trip hazards anywhere I might be moving around, or any pinch hazards, anything sharp that I might come in contact with. I always want to take safety first and make sure that my environment that I'm working in is a safe one. So, okay, so now that we've kind of talked about that a little bit and we're comfortable with our surrounding, again, once we get started here, any questions that you have, go ahead and type those in at the Zoom Q&A, and we'll try to get those in at the end of this time. So we'll just go ahead and go down the list of questions that we've received already, and then we'll see if there's any new at the end. So John, go ahead and start us off here.
How do I start the setup?
Okay, great. Yeah, so I've got it all set up here. And again, this isn't intended as a training session, every detail I'm going to cover, but just the general overview. So first thing I do is I walk up to a set of ears that I want to line bore. I slide the bar in. I go ahead then and I slide the setup cones, which are going to get me close, right? 80-20 rule. 80% of the time I'm going to use those cones to get me centered. The other 20% I may have to put a block of wood, I may have to cut out a plywood piece with a hole in the middle of it that centers the bore. I mean, whatever it takes, I want to get that fairly close to center. I'll go ahead and build my bearing setup, whether it's a universal here with the 3 or 4 legs on it, the single arm with the tack block and the bearing cartridge, or even a double arm. Once I have those all built on the bench, I'll slide them on in position so that they slide onto the bar right up against my workpiece, and then I'll just tack weld them on. Now at that point I've set the datum. The bearings are holding the bar on my center line. So that's my basic alignment. And then from there I can go either put the line boring machine on, the BB5, BB3, BB45, I can slide it on, and my feed, or I can attach the welder or whatever, but I'm sure we'll get questions on that. So that's my basic setup. I'm establishing that datum.
Can I put the boring bar and the welder on the same setup?
Yes, you can. So that's exactly what I have here. I have the BB5, but again, this general setup, BB3, BB45, and BB5, all use this same basic setup. And as long as I have this set up the bar first, then I can attach the welder to that with any 3 of those machines. Now, when we talk about the BB61, BB71, and BB81, it's a little bit of a different setup. Matter of fact, why don't I talk about that now? When I'm using the BB3 or BW3 or the BW1 with the BB3, BB45, or BB5, I use what I call a bore weld adapter kit, and that's that teardrop mount, the extension arm, and then the alignment block. And what that does is that sets the distance from the arm that the welder attaches to the center line of the bore. If I'm using the BB61, 71, 81, then I need to use my triangle base. Actually, anytime I'm using the welder without the boring bar, I want to use this triangle base. This gives me the ability to adjust for center line, and it also allows me to attach the welder to this, so I can use the welder any other application that I have other than with the boring bar. So bore weld adapter kit, use it with the bar, triangle base, and extension with the welder as a standalone.
Why would I want to set up both at the same time?
Good question. Yeah, you know, we've gotten the question before. Why don't you have one combination bar welder? The problem is then I could only do one thing at a time. We look at this as the most efficient way to utilize your time. I can be line boring and welding at the same time. So that gives me the ability to be twice as productive. One operator can do both at the same time. Gives me a lot of versatility. I can switch back and forth. So I can be line boring on one side, be welding on the other, and then when I'm done welding, I can swap, be machining where I just welded, and then be welding again. So it's very versatile and very flexible that way. Gives me the ability, I'm not forced to having to do one or the other. This way I can do both at the same time when need be, or if I don't need to, I can do one or the other by itself. So it doesn't tie me down to that one operation at a time. Good question.
How do I ensure they're on the same center line?
Okay, so we talked about that a little bit, but let's expand on it. So once I've established my datum with my bar, sliding it through those bearings, then that's my datum. That's my center line going forward. From that, I can add a tool bit to the bar and bore. I can mount a tool head to go to a bigger diameter and mount the tool bit on that boring head. Facing attachment, anything else I want. That bar is my datum. Well, I'm using that bar when I set up the welder as well. I slide my aluminum block on. I slide the bar out. I slide the bore weld adapter kit on, and that's what establishes my welder center line to the bar center line. So all of those are on that same datum. So that's what establishes is the bar and the bearing relationship.
How many bearings are needed to bore and weld?
Good question. Right now I've got 4 bearings, right? I've got a bearing cartridge that the bore weld adapter kit is on. I've got 2 universal bearings in the center of this setup, and then I've got a 4th bearing that my rotational drive. To be able to machine and weld, I have to have a minimum of 3. I can have as many more as I need or want, but I have to have a minimum of 3. I always have to have 2 bearings to do any line boring with a traveling bar. Again, this is BB3, BB45, or BB5. I have to, because they're a spherical bearing, I have to establish that datum with 2 bearings. That aligns my center line. That 3rd bearing is what I can attach the welder to. So as long as I have one in the center, one on the end, and one on the other end, I can attach my welder, my rotational drive, and my drive, and then I have that support bearing to establish that datum.
Should I machine before I weld?
That's a great question, and that's kind of the old Ford versus Chevy, right? I mean, my opinion is I always want to pre-bore when I have the ability to. I want to get any junk that's in that old bore out. I want a clean base material, and sometimes it's not always practical. If I have a big egg-shaped bore, I may not want to machine it so big that I'm getting rid of that egg, right? I want to get it as clean as I can, line boring it, because it's more efficient to remove the material that way. But then I can get in there with a grinder or a flapper wheel or some form of abrasive to get rid of that carbon scoring, that slag or whatever might be left over from that bore getting damaged. So in general, I want to get it as clean as I can. I want to have a good clean base material for my weld to stick to. So my preference is whenever I can, I want to pre-bore. I want to get it clean. But it's just not always practical. And so the rule would be to pre-bore. The exception would be not to and just grind it out. So great questions. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. We have any extras there, John?
Yeah. This one came in. Does the bore weld adapter mounting rod need to be at 12 o'clock, or can it be adjusted per clearance demands?
Well, you know, if it's a necessity, I would put it off for clearance demands. That's a great way to ask that question. My preference, though, whenever possible, is I want it right at 12. And the reason for that is gravity can be my friend and it can be my enemy. Gravity is going to want to put weight on the welder and all the tips, right? And so the longer my extension could be, the farther out onto the mounting rod the welder is, it's going to create a sag. And I want to be able to control that. If it's at an angle, I can't really control it. It's going to kind of be at a funky angle. If it's at 12 o'clock, I can adjust my mounting rod just one axis, vertical, and I don't have to worry about the side to side. So my preference is to always put it at 12 whenever possible. If I can't, then obviously I got to get the job done. Then I'll make an accommodation and put it off. But my preference is that I always want it at 12. That's a great question. Okay, well, I really appreciate our time together, and I look forward to the next time. Between now and then, if you have any further questions at all, go ahead and send us an email at askcpmt@cpmt.com. That's askcpmt@cpmt.com, and we'll be happy to answer those questions for you. All right, until next time, have a great day, and we'll see you then.